Welcome to the Rebuild SoCal Zone, where we talk about all things construction and infrastructure in Southern California. My name is Marcy Stanage, and I am your host for today's episode. This week, we are in Needles, California to discuss their critical water emergency and to speak with the men and women who not only faced it head on, but who had the courage to ask for help before it was too late. To begin, please welcome Rick Daniels, City Manager of Needles. Hi, Rick. It's so nice to see you again.
Oh, it's lovely to see you again. It's been a hectic period here over the last couple of months, and we're so grateful for all the help that the Rebuild SoCal Partnership has been able to bring to, a small, rural, isolated community that has trouble competing at a statewide level with some of the more urban, larger, well-staffed organizations.
Rick, for our listeners who may not know, can you explain to them where the city of Needles is located in Southern California? And can you also describe your community?
Needles, for those of you who don't know or have never been here, I encourage you to come. We call ourselves the East Coast of California
Hmm.
in the sense that we are on the Colorado River. It is the width of the river, and you're into Arizona or you're into Nevada. Our closest California communities are Blythe to the south, which is about 100 miles, and Barstow to the west, which is about 140 miles. So that creates a sense of isolation and takes away a lot of the opportunities to partner with nearby communities to solve problems on a regional basis. The city's about 5,200 people. It is a small business economy with the primary employers being restaurants, gas stations, tourism related businesses like hotels for travelers and boaters, which find their way here in the summer because we have the best boat launch on this stretch of the Colorado River. The city is in the middle of the Mojave Desert. So to say it's dry and hot is an understatement. We've already had during June and July a couple, 3 days, well over 125 degrees. They say it's a dry heat, but at 125, hot is hot. And I guess low humidity keeps you from pressure cooking
Right.
to death, but it's certainly a challenge. The city's population is low income. We're classified by the state of California as a disadvantaged community. Some 57% of our population is on some form of government assistance. Now, I'm not so sure whether that includes my wife's Social Security check, but it is a low income community. We are approximately 38,000 median household income, where the state median household income is over 65. So it's a town that is rich in history in the sense that it's 108 years old. And it started off as a railroad town. It is the first crew change on eastbound trains out of LA. And it's also, we have Amtrak service. So it is a place where you can get on Amtrak at midnight and be in Union Station at 8 o'clock in the morning. I know I've made that trip many times myself. So there are about 1,000 railroad workers that work out of this station, but most of those people live in Arizona due to taxes. We find ourselves, from a development standpoint, at a disadvantage in the sense that California rules and regulations of all type are significantly in excess of Nevada's and Arizona's. So we struggle in our economic development efforts because of that differential. and the cost and regulation. For example, we're trying to recruit a trucking company, long haul trucking company, and they identified that workers' comp in California was 16% of gross salary of their employees, whereas workers' comp in Arizona was 6%. And that 10% times 140 drivers at $85,000 a year was enough to make it to where it was unlikely that that company was going to locate here.
In order for our listeners to get a true sense of what you and the rest of your staff had gone through, can you give some background information and explain to our listeners at what point you knew it was time to ask for help from the state so that your city did not run out of water?
Because of the age of the city and the age of the infrastructure, it's crumbling beneath our feet. Like a lot of cities, we're not alone in this. So we have a problem. Our biggest challenge is keeping up. Last year, we had over 220 water leaks in our water system, where just the age of the pipe was such that the pipes failed. We had a blowout of a major transmission line over the freeway that shut down the freeway for about 6 hours, but also knocked us out of water in January of 2020. We've had, as you will hear, we had a pump that went down and was unable to function. So all of this rolled together is in 2019, the state of California established water standards for iron and manganese. And neither one of those two chemicals, which are naturally occurring in the Colorado River water, for all the cities along the Colorado River, plus LA, because they import Colorado River water into the city. Those are naturally occurring and they have no public health threat. They are not a material or a chemical or a compound that, for example, creates cancer or has any serious health effects. But the state adopted standards for iron and manganese that are not in existence in any of our neighboring states. So that knocked out of operation 3 of our 4 wells and left us with one operating well that could meet those standards. So all of a sudden, rather than having a duplicate system, a redundant system, a system that could continue to supply water when in the high temperatures, we had one well that was running 23 hours a day. And that is vulnerability for a population in 120-degree weather that had high risk written all over it. As soon as we realized that the wells were going to be unusable by this questionable state standard, we began a process to find a new well. We conducted hydrogeologic studies of the entire region. We looked at a number of well sites. We looked at all kinds of water quality to make sure that we could get water quality that didn't exhibit those iron and manganese content characteristics, and ended up focusing on one, and we started environmental review and started the permitting process for that new well. At the same time, we continued to operate with only one well, operating in the summer 23 hours a day. And we applied for, well, it's clear with the low income nature of the community, the high risk situation, that increasing the water rates enough to cover the cost of the new well was just infeasible. it would have put many people at risk for water use. And then it was also crippled, our efforts were crippled by the fact that the state legislature prohibited anybody from being cut off from water during the COVID period. Now, I'm not objecting to the COVID sensitivities at all, but it left us with fewer people to pay a significant cost of water. And we watched very carefully as the state was accumulating billions of dollars of money and setting aside hundreds of millions of dollars for low income, disadvantaged, rural, isolated communities. And when you look up that definition in the dictionary, you can find a picture of needles. So we applied for grant funding from the state. The money had been allocated uh, by the legislature for water system improvements, repairs, and capital projects. And we ran into a stone wall. And we we tried and tried to get a reasonable approach with a sense of urgency amongst those people making the decision in Sacramento, and a very, very, very difficult time in getting through. There were decisions that were made about what needed to be done that were changed the next day, which complicated our life. We were trying to hit a moving target. Every additional change that the regulators wanted made it more difficult and made it longer in order to get funding.
So, just to touch on something that followed up in the middle of all of your efforts at trying to apply for these grants through the state, Dave Sorum, who is a member of our board, contacted a LA Times reporter, Ralph Vardabedian, and he did an LA Times story that made the front page that talked about what your community went through and the steps that it took to get to where you were going. Can you just explain to our listeners what that LA Times article meant to you and to your community?
We eventually did prevail in securing funding, but that came about as a result of an article that was in the LA Times. The LA Times covered it on the front page and pointed out and highlighted and focused on the difficulties that small cities have. I mean, here you have a disadvantaged, small, rural, isolated community that was being denied funds that were set aside for this very specific purpose. And it's funny that the LA Times article caused a lot of action. We enjoy great support from Senator Dianne Feinstein, from Thurston Smith, who's our assembly member, Shannon Grove, who's our state senator, plus a number of other elected officials step forward and encourage the governor and the state water authorities to break loose the money. So we went ahead and started engineering, design. We started laying out the plans well in advance of getting the grant approved, and it was all on a hope and a prayer. But we've been able to make that happen, and within the next few months, we'll have a redundant water system that the people in this community, the 5,200 good and decent people that rely on the city water system, they can be assured that there'll be clean, drinkable, and clear water. So it was, there were a lot of sleepless nights because of the vulnerability that we had. But in the end, through the work of a lot of people in this building, particularly Rainey Torrance, and some people in Sacramento that saw the light, that problem's on its way to being solved.
Well, it definitely sounds like the city of Needles has the best possible person in charge of their community. You sound passionate. I can hear the passion in your voice. I can see the passion on your face when you talk about it. And that is exactly why we do what we do. And it makes us feel so good that you are so passionate about what you do as well. Rick, thank you so much for telling your story. Our listeners needed to hear that. I get overwhelmed every time I hear you talk about it. So thank you again. And it was so nice seeing you again.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you for visiting. It is that it's not just Needles. There are small communities all across the inland parts of California that are in dire need of help.
Okay.
And we're just a representative one. And if we can do anything to help any of those communities, we stand ready. But thank you so much to the Rebuild SoCal Partnership. As I've said before, I think there'll be a statue in the park dedicated to them.
Thank you, Rick. Next up, we have the honor and privilege to speak with the Mayor of Needles, Mr. Jeff Williams. Hello, Mayor Williams. How are you doing today?
Doing good. Thank you.
Great to hear it. So I think we'll just jump right into our questions. So, as the mayor of Needles, what were your first thoughts when your city officials briefed you on the current water emergency?
Yeah, I was very concerned, as you can imagine, not being able to supply our citizens with drinking water was a major concern. We started working diligently on trying to figure out what we're going to do to fix this problem that I might add was made by the state of California in our instance with their manganese issues that they had. And three of our four wells had an issue with manganese, and since the state decided to regulate it and then lowered the amount of manganese that you can actually serve to your constituents, it really put us in a bind.
I can imagine, yeah. Yeah, and as you know, I had sent some letters to the legislators who represent your district, and I had really only heard back from one, and that was Senator Shannon Grove's office. However, it's my knowledge you were contacted by Shannon Grove, Thurston Smith, and possibly Congressman Obernolte.
Yes,
Can you walk us through those conversations that you had with them?
sure. I mean, they were good conversations with Senator Grove and Assemblyman Smith, and then Congressman Jay Obernolte. That they were all good conversations. It was what can we do to help, and we had already submitted some paperwork to the water board and to drinking water, I guess, board and some other requests, and also the governor Newsom saying we needed this help. And I told him if you could just make some phone calls, usually that loosens stuff up there in Sacramento. We can get some stuff done. And they were very cooperative, and it was nice to hear that they were right on board.
That's great.
And
Did
I
they?
didn't hear back from the governor. You know, he's a little tied up, I guess, but I
Yeah,
heard back from the rest of them.
I was wondering that was going to be my next question was if you had heard from Governor Newsom at all. I had also reached out to him and didn't have any luck, but we were very thankful that Senator Feinstein's office stepped in, even though there's not a lot they can do at the federal level when you are asking for state funding, but she did just enough to really get the ball rolling. So we were really happy about that as well.
Yeah, that was great. Obernolte was basically in the same position. He said if he had known we'd had that kind of issue, he would have tried to get us into that infrastructure bill they're trying to pass up there. And I told him this is a state issue, and the state put us in this spot, and they should give us the money to get out of it. So, you know, he was grateful we weren't mad at him for not getting us some money.
Yeah, no, good. Okay. Well, I'm glad you had those conversations. That makes me feel better. So now that the city has been awarded the funding, what does this new well mean for your community?
Oh boy, the well with the reservoir is going to get us to about 48 hours of, if we have any issues with either of these wells, we'll be able to keep providing good water to our citizens for 48 hours. So that's a big jump.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So right now, is it my understanding that you have less than 24 hours of storage?
Right.
Okay. And I believe the Metropolitan Water District wants or thinks that everybody should have at least 7 days of water storage.
Well, yeah, that would be great. That's what the Southern California communities are all trying to get to. But I mean, 48 hours would help on the employees here and myself with sleepless nights. That's for sure. We still have a lot of work in the city to get to the capacity of having 7 days um, of capacity in our well for our citizens. And we also have some infrastructure needs here in the city with our piping and some of our other items that we need replaced to make sure we have good drinking water that go out to our constituents.
Yeah, that's understandable. I know talking to Brian and to Rainey, there is still a lot of work to be done, and we are actually in the process of helping you get that moving. So we are hoping that sooner rather than later, we can get all that started as well.
That would be great. Any help that we could get for the city and its infrastructure, especially the drinking water and such, would be fantastic.
I agree. Definitely. Well, I am so glad that everything has worked out, and we are very excited for you to be able to start construction, and we're excited for the ribbon cutting.
Oh, we are too. We can't wait. I've been pushing staff, and Rainey's been doing a great job, and Rick and Patrick, they've all been doing great job on trying to get this done because I've been calling them every day or coming down here and seeing them every day, asking, where are we at? I want that stuff out to bid so when we get the money, we can just pay them because it's done.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I have to add that your staff at the city is an amazing group of people, and you have some really good people that are representing your community. So you should be very proud.
Well, I am. We have some superstars here for sure.
You sure do.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Mayor, for taking the time to talk with us today. It's been such a pleasure working with everybody at the city and with your community.
Good. That makes me feel really good to hear. Thank
Great.
you.
You're welcome, and thank you, and we will talk to you soon.
Okay. Thank you. Have a good day.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Rebuild SoCal Zone. Please join us again for a future episode where we continue the conversation around the water emergency in Needles, California.